The Whispering Manor. On the edge of a small town, a decaying Victorian mansion sat abandoned, its windows dark and shattered. Locals whispered that the house was haunted by its last owner, a reclusive man named Mr. Groves, who had lost his mind and locked himself in the attic before vanishing without a trace. One Halloween night, a group of teenagers dared each other to explore the house. Armed with flashlights and a nervous sense of adventure, they stepped inside. The house was silent except for the groan of floorboards, and a chill hung in the air, carrying the faint scent of mold and decay. As they explored, they felt as though they were being watched. Shadows shifted at the edge of their vision, but every time they turned, they saw nothing. One by one, the friends began hearing whispers, a low, raspy voice calling their names, telling them to come closer. They followed the sound up to the attic, where the air was thick and suffocating. The attic was filled with old furniture, but in the corner was a small, dusty mirror. As they approached it, one of them, Danny, noticed his reflection smiling back at him, though his face remained expressionless. His friends gasped as the reflection raised a hand and waved, even though Danny's hands stayed at his sides. Panicked, they turned to leave, but the door slammed shut and the whispering grew louder. They tried to pull Danny away, but he seemed mesmerized, staring into the mirror. Suddenly, his reflection laughed and disappeared, leaving only darkness in the glass. Danny let out a scream, his body rigid, eyes unblinking. They smashed the mirror, shattering it to pieces, and the spell broke. The friends rushed out of the house, dragging Danny, who seemed like an empty shell, unable to speak. To this day, Danny never recovered, and on Halloween night, locals say you can hear his faint, desperate whisper echoing from the attic of Whispering Manor. The Harvest Children. In a farming village surrounded by miles of cornfields, Halloween was a time for harvest, for celebrating the end of the season. But the townspeople knew the legend of the Harvest Children, ghostly figures who were said to appear when the moon was full, haunting the fields and searching for a way back home. On Halloween night, the townspeople noticed the air felt colder, and a strange mist rolled in over the fields. Ben, a local farmer, had always brushed off the legend, but when he went out to inspect his fields, he saw small, shadowy figures moving between the rows of corn, their movements jerky and unnatural. Curious and disturbed, Ben crept closer, his flashlight flickering. Suddenly, he saw them clearly, dozens of ghostly children with hollow eyes, their clothes torn and dirty, each one whispering his name. He recognized a few as children who had mysteriously vanished years ago, their faces frozen in a haunting expression of sadness. Terrified, he turned to run, but a cold, bony hand grabbed his arm. One of the children looked up at him and spoke in a hollow voice. "We need to be returned." Ben struggled to pull free, but as he looked into the child's eyes, a flood of memories washed over him. He saw visions of townspeople abandoning unwanted children in the cornfields, their cries fading into the night as they were left to the mercy of the elements. In horror, Ben realized the truth. These were the souls of the forgotten, and they wanted vengeance. When Ben returned to town the next morning, he was pale and withdrawn, muttering about the Harvest Children, who would soon return for everyone else. No one believed him, until townsfolk began seeing the children themselves, wandering the fields, waiting for the townspeople who had abandoned them to join their restless souls. The Curse of Widow's Grove. In the middle of Widow's Grove, a dense, old forest that was shunned by the locals, stood a single, gnarled oak tree. Legend had it that a widow, once betrayed and wronged by the town, had cursed it centuries ago. They said she wandered the grove at night, calling out to those who dared to trespass, offering them one last chance at forgiveness. On Halloween night, a group of friends decided to brave the grove, laughing off the tales as superstition. As they walked deeper into the forest, an eerie silence settled around them, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Just as they reached the ancient oak tree, a figure appeared, a woman draped in a black veil, her face hidden in shadow. The woman held out her hand and asked each of them if they had a sin they wanted to confess, her voice echoing strangely through the trees. Laughing nervously, one of them, Amy, decided to play along and stepped forward, claiming she'd stolen a candy bar when she was a kid. The woman shook her head, saying, "It's not the candy you stole, but the trust." One by one, the others stepped forward, and with each confession, the woman seemed to know more about their secrets than they'd revealed. When the last friend, Tom, confessed he had nothing to share, the woman's voice dropped to a sinister whisper. "Lies," she said, and raised a pale hand toward him. Shadows stretched from the base of the tree and wrapped around his feet, pulling him down as he struggled to escape. The friends tried to pull him free, but the shadows were too strong. The woman's laughter filled the grove, echoing through the night as Tom was dragged into the ground, disappearing under a tangle of roots. Panicked, the friends ran, vowing never to return. But ever since that night, the figure of a young man, bound by shadowy vines, can be seen beneath the oak tree every Halloween, his face frozen in terror, forever a part of the curse of Widow's Grove.